What's up, everybody? I'm Brett Pape. That's Coach Bruce, and this is the Coach Approach. How you doing, brother? What's going on?
I'm good, man. Sorry about that. I was trying to get my sip of bourbon in before we went live.
Well, usually I talk for about 10 minutes before I ever let you say anything, so I'm not surprised you tried to take a drink. Usually have plenty of time to do that. Hey, before we get into the show, I just kind of wanted to ask you not necessarily a personal question. Don't go into the breakdown as an analyst. Go into how you're feeling as a fan. How did you take Sunday night? I mean, that had to be tough as a Dallas Cowboy fan. And let me just throw out my 2 cents. That was a situation where I was really hoping to see a heck of a lot more out of Dak Prescott. I've seen you defend him, and I'm not saying defend him, so to speak, but you kind of went after a former NFL guy who went after him. But just as a fan, how are you holding up?
I'm holding up fine, man. I mean, I think it's what we've said. We've said it on this show, and it's what the media talking about the Cowboys gets you clicks. It gets you noticed. It gets you right. And so that's what these analysts are doing. You can't turn on Get Up or any other show without some headline on the Dallas Cowboys. So, but here's the deal: is until he wins in the biggest games and on the biggest stage, this is always going to be the narrative. He did not play well. He threw 3 interceptions. Yes, one got tipped up. Doesn't matter. It counts in the stat sheet as an interception. We don't go back at the end of the year, go watch all the film and go, yeah, but it's what it is. He's got 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions through the first 5 games. And so it is what it is. And, you know, it wasn't Dak Prescott didn't get beat. And that's part of my issue. The Dallas Cowboys got beat on every level in every phase of the game. They lost in the trenches like they do in the playoffs. You've got to find a way to mentally block that stuff out and just say, look, we're going to go play football, you know? And
I think, as an outside observer, and sorry to cut you off, but man, I think it's twofold. And I think coaching and Dak have a heck of a lot to do with it. I don't know. I mean, if it's not Dak not performing, if it's not for whatever, you're right. It was every aspect of the game. So that's got to come down to coaching. I mean, is he still able to motivate young athletes? And it's a young team, even if it's not a young team as far as 30 years old with a quarterback and so forth. But whatever, the point that I'm trying to bring up is, can he still relate? Can he still motivate? And I worry that he can't. And here we go again. And you guys are going to be looking for a new coach at the end of the year. And I don't know, Coach. I think a lot of it comes down to what Jerry Jones has done with this organization.
Well, and this is what we said at the beginning of the year. Mike McCarthy, and I believe this, they talked Dan Quinn in the stand, right? Whether that's the belief of, hey, if this thing with Mike McCarthy doesn't work out, you're the next guy, whatever it was, it kept him from taking interviews for head coaching jobs or not taking another opportunity. Mike McCarthy, you get rid of Kellen Moore, you take the play calling back in your own hands. And what we have seen to this point is a very vanilla offense. It was the concern I had in the beginning of the year, and I talked about it when Zeke Elliott was there. Tony Pollard is not a 400-touch guy. We're seeing him getting a lot of volume week to week and most weeks and not being as efficient as he was the year before. You are seeing CeeDee Lamb not get schemed as a wide receiver 1 like Kevin O'Connell and Sean McVay and these other offensive coordinators will do. I don't understand from a philosophical standpoint what Mike McCarthy is trying to accomplish. And that's, I think, is the most frustrating part. And so it's going to be another guy that's like, hey, maybe he was a decent offensive coordinator. He's won a Super Bowl with Green Bay. I get it. But yeah, I'm with you. And I get what people say. If you look at Dak's footwork, I watched a little bit of the game. If you look at Dak's footwork and some of the play calls and some of the progressions, Dak didn't look good. His footwork wasn't good. He wasn't lined up. He wasn't necessarily going through his progression like he should have been. It wasn't a clean game, but also wasn't a great called game either. And so there's a lot of issues in Dallas. But look, San Francisco, this is San Francisco. This is a very, very good football team. And so I'm a big believer in, instead of beating up Dallas for what they didn't do, give San Francisco all the credit in the world, man. I mean, they absolutely played a hell of a game.
We'll get into them because you're absolutely – look, two things can be true. San Francisco is one hell of a football team.
Yep.
And the second is the Dallas Cowboys did not come into that game ready to go and certainly didn't look like they were pumped up and looking forward to the challenge. And it was not pretty. But I didn't bring this up to kind of stick a knife right in your back right off the bat. But
I'm a Cowboys fan, man. We're used to it.
There you go. All right. Hey, let's get into the news and injuries. Week 6. Sorry that we didn't have a Sunday or a Saturday show this week. Coach had a wedding. We won't have one this week either. He's got another wedding to go to while I'll be, hiking out in the mountains looking for deer or bear on my hunt this week. And before all you guys tell me that's the worst thing you can do, please understand the likelihood of me coming home with either is slim to none. So we don't need to get into if it's, something I should or shouldn't be doing. But let's get into news and injuries for the week. Holy smokes. Last week, I kind of jokingly said this is a week where we finally don't have to talk about injuries. And we got 3 big ones right now. If you're heavily invested in fantasy football and everyone loves the 3 guys we're going to talk about right off the bat. And the number 1 guy is Justin Jefferson. Didn't watch much of the game, but I did turn it on late. And I saw him slowly kind of walking off the field, grabbing his hammy. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And that's what it is. And the reality of it is that if Minnesota was in a better situation right now, I don't know if they put him on the IR for 4 weeks. But there's no reason for him to play right now with them being 1-4, with them looking almost as if they are they're almost in pick mode. How can we get a better pick? They've always been in that pick 19 to 24 range where you're never able to get a game changer at the quarterback position unless you are fortunate and find Brock Purdy in the 7th round. But here we are, Justin Jefferson out for the next 4 weeks. And as for fantasy football, it's huge because he's obviously the number 1 receiver.
Not only that, in a non-super flex format, he was a 1.01 in a lot of drafts. Yeah. And so when you lose that pick and you're waiting for that to come all the way back around, right, at 2.12, and you've got it's tough when you lose that top guy. So, but from Minnesota Vikings perspective, this is great for TJ Hawkinson owners. I think he becomes the guy that is going to see a lot of the bulk of the targets right now. Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne. KJ Osborne to me is going to line up. He's going to be the X receiver. Jordan Addison's going to be that guy that's going to play the slot a little bit outside, and you've got TJ Hawkinson, and then your 4th guy is Brandon Powell. But I wouldn't be surprised. They'll mix in a little bit of 12 personnel with Hawkinson and Josh Oliver, with Josh being more inline and Hawk in the slot. So it's going to be interesting to see what Kevin O'Connell, I think, is great at scheming, what he does with that offense without Justin Jefferson, because so much of what they did in the passing game was setting him up for success and bubbles of space in the passing game. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, you know who I really like, and you brought him up already, and that's Jordan Addison, and we'll get to get into him a little more. I find it kind of Oliver, tight end out of played for Jacksonville. Everyone talked about why did they bring him in. You've got TJ. I know why you brought him in, because he's one hell of a run blocker. But I'll tell you what, he's done pretty good in the pass blocking, he's done pretty good in the pass offense. Had a big catch last week. Unfortunately, he fumbled it, but he's had a little more play than I thought he would in the passing game. Let's move on to the next one. That's De'Von Achane. De'Von Achane, I could talk about him for hours, and I know you and I have talked about him in the past quite a bit because I've been pretty high on him for a little bit of time. And we'll talk philosophically. But anyways, he's out. He's on the IR with a knee injury. Didn't really see it in the course of the game. Didn't see when it happened. But he's out. And talk about a kid that's come in. He had one carry in week 1, if that. But ever since he's gotten the opportunity, he's the number 1 running back in the rookie class as far as performance. And that's with guys like Jahmyr Gibbs. That's with guys like Bijan Robinson. What he's done so far, he's a perfect fit in that offense. It's been pretty impressive. So it kind of hurts that he's going to be gone for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's extremely frustrating. The guy's got 11.2 yards per touch in just 4 games played. He's found the end zone 7 times. He's a highlight reel, and it doesn't matter if it's a jet sweep, which they've done with him. They've ran reverses with him. They've ran in between the tackles. They've involved him in the passing game. Every time he touches the ball, it's electric, and it's crazy the start he's had to NFL career through just the first 4 games. So not having him on the field in Miami is tough. Look, Raheem Mostert, get it, 31 years old, but look what he's done with his touch has been great. I know that we also talked about Jeff Wilson in the offseason as Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert, and De'Von Achane being a good three back committee in Miami. Jeff Wilson may not be this week, but the following week you get him back. He's done some things when he's gotten opportunities, but he can stay healthy. So you miss the explosiveness and the speed. It's just next level when he touches the ball. But this is a team that's still going to be very good with Mostert and Jeff Wilson, and if you even want to throw in Chris Brooks and Salvon Ahmed.
All right, hey, let's get into the philosophical part, because you know how high I've been on him for a long time. And so
Yep.
I get into prior to me getting involved with Twitter in about 2019, as far as really following people. I think you and I met during that year. That was the first year we might have been in. We were in a couple of leagues together, I believe. Then COVID hit. Then it just kind of COVID was almost like what Chris Moneymaker was to poker. COVID made fantasy football. It just blew up. We all had this free time. We were all at home. We all had the ability to draft 20 teams. You go on Twitter, you're invited every other day. But I learned a lot during that time. And I learned that, me utilizing or only utilizing my own opinion on players and prospects, I kind of had a lot of misses. So, and then I also drafted a lot in rookie drafts where I strictly went off of my need on my team. If I didn't have a quarterback, well, I'm going to draft a quarterback, whatever it may be. And during the transition from going into Twitter analysts, I learned about BPA, always draft best player available. Fast forward to the last draft, I'm kind of hurting at running back. I've got pick 4 and I just drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. Pick 4, I took JSN. But I kind of struggled because I knew that I wanted Devin in my team. I wanted him to fill a roster spot, but more importantly, I thought his talent was good enough. Disappointed. And also, but I also just kind of proud that I stuck with BPA. But gosh dang, I sure wish I had that guy on my team.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing about rookie drafts. I did some rookie drafts long before the NFL draft. We knew what landing spots were, but David, you were high on De'Von Achane, and a lot of people were. I was high on him, but not as high as you were. You were there certainly on him before I was. Matter of fact, you brought more attention to him for me going through the process, and I broke down all the rookies for this upcoming draft at every position, and he popped. His film popped. His metrics popped. He's got world level track speed. And I think a lot of people thought he'd run a sub 4.3, but yeah, it's when you're talking about rookie drafts, it's tough because you're talking about rookies and of course scoring formats type of format that you're in, dynasty versus redraft, whatever. There's so many variables that come into play in understanding your scoring systems. But De'Von Achane was that guy that looking back, you're probably taking De'Von Achane over Jahmyr Gibbs, right?
Oh, without a doubt.
He's the first running. Well, you're taking Bijan Robinson first. Let's be honest, but you're taking De'Von Achane
dynasty, so yes,
as the RB2. If this draft you were to do it over again, right? You take him over Tank Bigsby. You'll take him over any of those guys.
Yeah.
And so it's trusting your process, right? Because you were high on him before a lot of other people were. And hindsight, you're like, man, what would he have done in Alabama if he was there with Jahmyr? If it was him and Jahmyr Gibbs was at Texas A&M?
That doesn't disqualify it, but anything that Jahmyr Gibbs is a prospect. But at the same time, anyways, we can talk about how I just hurt every day that he's not on my home league. Let's get to this question. First question of the day. First and foremost, Richard Bruce, Coach Bruce, your brother's back in. Love to see it. Much love, but keep Kirk and JJ out. All right, let's go to Kenneth's question here. First, Kenneth, I'm assuming redraft, but what's the values of these hurt players if I try to trade? Trade for or trade? Great question. He's talking about JJ. Oh my gosh, all the guys we're going to get into. JJ, Achane, AR5, and Connor. If you're trying to acquire them, I'm going to lowball and work up to where I feel comfortable making the deal. But the deal is certainly less, because if it's a situation where we are in dynasty, I'm still going best player. I'm not trading. You get what I'm saying. It changes with dynasty and redraft. And in redraft, I'm going to go ahead and throw a low offer to get them. So that's where I'm at. What about you, Coach?
Well, and I think here's the thing when it talks about trades, right? Is you have a guy that you say, hey, now's the time for me to come in. Teams are desperate. They're trying to win. They're trying to get in the playoffs. Maybe they'll be willing to trade a Justin Jefferson for 2 starters, and I can get the long-term impact of getting JJ on my roster. But your market is different in every league that you play in. It's all about the guys you're trading with. Are they active? And where do they perceive the value of the same players, right? It's always, we always talk about buy low and sell high. And I always think it's funny when people say that, because it's like, hey, you can say you're going to buy low on somebody, but it's going to depend on the market of that specific league that you're talking about. Not everybody is going to be willing to sell him low.
Preach.
Right. So I think that's where I get frustrated with these conversations on Twitter, with people going back and forth on that. But Kenneth, if you can get Jay, and I agree with you, to me, it's like sales 101, not to get into my profession, but first one to give a number loses sometimes, right? So if you're going to come in, you're going to lowball an offer. You, again, have to know your league mates and your market. And certain players in that league may look at that and say, that's not even an offer I'm going to entertain, decline, move on. I'm not even going to engage in a conversation with you. So yeah, you want to lowball it, but not lowball it to the extent that the guy doesn't take the trade offer serious enough to negotiate. But you never want to start out with what you're willing to do. You're going to start out below that, work your way up to that, keep that conversation going, keep it respectful, and hopefully end up getting him at value. But again, value is determined by the league mates you're trading with.
Isn't that the truth? Because my home league, we have been in the same league for 28 years now, and they're not on Twitter. They don't necessarily know, their value is not the same. And I'm not trying to disrespect them at all or so forth, because some of them treat quarterbacks much differently than I do and so forth in a 1-quarterback league. The point is, though, it's still different. I can't trade a 2nd-round pick for a good quarterback when a lot of people on Twitter tell you 1-quarterback leagues don't ever give up a 1st rounder for a quarterback. So you're absolutely right. The league you play in dictates what you can or can't do to get a player or trade a player.
Yeah, but if you can sell higher and buy low, absolutely, to try to take advantage of that opportunity and be willing to negotiate through on that, find out how they perceive players. Like here's one thing I'll tell you, not to get long-winded on this question, but such a great question, is more often than not, if I'm selling a player that I think I can sell high, right, I'm talking him up like crazy, right? I'm making him sound like he's the best thing in the world. And the other guy might be saying, yeah, but he's going to try to downplay him, even though he thinks he's really, really talented too, which is why he's trying to acquire him. And so it's sifting through the bullshit, right? And the longer you play in these leagues, the more you get to know your league mates and track what their moves are, the easier it is to get those things done.
Great. Let's move on. We got a few more questions, but let's get to our next injury real quick, and then we'll jump back to questions. Anthony Richardson, the 101 in a lot of leagues and Superflex for quarterback spot. And after his start and just seeing the physical ability he has, a lot of people are saying, hey, man, we should have took him at the 101. No disrespect to CJ Stroud. But with that being said, once again, he leaves a game early. I think it's the 3rd time this year he's left a game early, but this time it's a little more significant. AC sprain, he's on the IR. He'll be out the next 4 weeks. Seen a lot of takes. Obviously, if you have them, it hurts. But if you have guys like Michael Pittman, if you have other guys on that team, don't know how much it really hurts you, though. It only hurts you if you have Anthony Richardson, to me.
No, I agree. Right. Anthony Richards is always going to have the ability to take touches away in the red zone from the running backs, and he's going to take away passing volume against some receivers based on game script. But I'm still high on Josh Downs. I'm still high on Michael Pittman. I still like Jonathan Taylor. Zach Moss is playing well. But I think Gardner Minshew is 1-0 as a starter this season. He's had 2 other games outside of that where he had to come in and play a significant amount of time because A-Rich got hurt. But he's completing 69% of his passes with 7 touchdowns and 2 touchdowns and no interceptions so far this year. He's a serviceable guy. He's not a guy you want for 17 games as your starter, but he's a guy that can fill in for you over 3 or 4 games while A-Rich is out and keep your team competitive.
Agreed. I heard on the radio today, and it was pretty neat to hear it, but Gardner Minshew, according to the guy on the radio that I heard, said that he's the number one backup in football. And I'm excited because he's a fun player himself to watch play. You saw him last year after he came in and replaced Jalen Hurts in a game. He might have to start a whole game. Just the love for the game and how excited he was afterwards. There was video of him with his dad celebrating. So anytime that you get to see Gardner Minshew play football, it's fun. But Anthony Richardson being out still hurts. Let's move on to another question. We had a question. I believe it's Kmet or Pitts. I'm assuming that is a start-sit question. I love the way. First and foremost, if you're a Pitts owner, you saw him go over 86 yards in receiving last week. You were happy because I have him in a few leagues. I start him every week, mostly because he's still 10 times better because I didn't think I'd have to invest much behind him. I thought I could rely on him when I got him. But needless to say, it was nice to see him in that Atlanta office get a little better last week. But with that being said, it's Kmet for me if we're talking start and sit this week.
Yeah, look, Washington's been tough against tight ends. That's who Pitts and the Atlanta Falcons have this week. And then you look at Kmet, they've got Minnesota, who struggles against the tight end. It's a much favorable matchup. We've seen what Cole Kmet has done consistently throughout the season versus Kyle Pitts really having one flash game, which was last week, which hopefully he'll continue to go down that road. But not a good matchup for Kyle Pitts this week. I would lean Cole Kmet as well.
There you go. We got another tight end question. We got Dalton Kincaid. We got two Daltons here. Who would have thought? Dalton Schultz and Jake Ferguson. Let's see. It looks like Jake Ferguson to me, Coach. Can you believe it?
Schultz,
the Chargers.
Yeah, so I expect that to be a high-scoring game. So, and you've looked at Ferguson's leading tight ends this year in targets in the red zone. Dallas has been in the red zone quite often this year, just have not been able to execute. So I like his ability to get you, and I think he's had 7 or 8 targets a couple times this year. So I do like Jake Ferguson. I'm not sold on Dalton Kincaid. He's got to place the Giants this week, but he's nursing an injury. And then Dalton Schultz played well last week, but they play a New Orleans Saints defense that is tough. So I lean Jake Ferguson as well. We're 2 for 2, man. We're on the same page with both of these. I like the matchup for Fergie against the Chargers.
There we go. Let's go to our next question. Before we get into Carlos here, let's talk about Kenneth. Tells us something here. He wants to know: would you try and trade James Cook? Would you trade for James Cook if you have Achane right now? So right now, would you take? I would take Cooks right now. You're missing him for 4 weeks. It's redraft. Cooks, unfortunately, I talk about Cooks later on as one of my fallers, but I think that's a situation that has occurred over the last few weeks with the Buffalo offense. But I'm going to go ahead and take the floor of James Cook for the rest of the season, especially with him playing over the ceiling of Achane after he gets back. What about you, Coach?
Yeah, I think it's a tough call. It depends on where you're at record-wise right now. You're in week 5.
And if you've got a great group of running backs where you can afford not to have Achane right now, then keep Achane. But if you need someone to go in, get James Cook.
Yeah, if you're in week 5 and you've got a 4-1 record and you're going to be in the playoffs, I'm holding on to Achane. If I'm, 2-3, 3-2, and I've got a tough matchup this week, and I'm probably leaning towards I've got to get some wins to get into the playoffs. So I'm probably going to try to make a deal for, James Cook. So it depends on where you're at and where. Look, are you in a rebuild mode? Or are you in? I'm trying to win a championship mode. Where are you currently at?
Yeah, everyone is in win mode in redraft. Right?
I missed the redraft part. Yep, there you go.
Yeah. So there you go. Let's get to Carlos' question here. He's got an opportunity to trade Christian Watson. He can either take Pacheco or he can have Atwell and McLaughlin. Again, I'm going to assume that we're talking redraft because if it wasn't, I'm keeping Christian Watson in both scenarios. If it's redraft, I'm probably taking Pacheco after watching the Green Bay offense against.
Yeah, I'm taking Isaiah Pacheco in that first one over Christian Watson.
And I'm probably keeping Watson in the second one.
Yeah, look, I think we love Cinderella stories, right? I think we love what Jaleel McLaughlin's done with the touches that he has, but Javonte Williams is coming back from the quad injury, even if he's a little bit limited this week. And we'll get into the Denver game with Thursday Night Football, but I'm just keeping Christian Watson there too.
Well, you saw Christian Watson. He hasn't He has not had a lot of opportunities due to injury, and then he hasn't had a lot of targets so far this year. But he scored a touchdown in his first game. His second game, if it wasn't for a horse collar, he scores another touchdown on a huge play that would have led to the win for the Packers. But that's just a disgruntled Packers fan here talking. So I'm not down on Christian Watson.
Yeah.
So, but if I can get Pacheco over him right now, I'm taking Pacheco.
And hey, I agree with you. And Tutu Atwell's the third or fourth option now in that Rams offense, right?
All
You've
right,
got Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. So
absolutely, and thank God Puka still looked like Puka, even though Cooper was back last week. We got Nico Collins or Josh Downs for a start sit. I am going with Nico. That is the number one receiver in that offense. Josh Downs, I like the talent, but he's not quite ready for me to start over Collins.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm taking Nico Collins as wide receiver one in an offense where your rookie quarterback's averaging 300 yards passing per game. So I'm sticking with Nico.
All right, Cam's got a question. Breece Hall or Nico Collins at flex moving forward? Moving forward seems very kind of obscure.
Play the matchups.
Correct. And this week you got Breece Hall going against Buffalo. I saw somewhere I was on. In fact, my coworker goes, "Hey man, why do they have Breece Hall as do not start this week?" I go, "That is ridiculous. I don't care who he plays. Not a must start. Just don't start him. Like don't play him. Get him out of the lineup." Breece Hall's talent is, you saw what he did. Now, granted, it was against a terrible defense in Denver last week, but the leash was taken off him, and he exploded with the performance that we saw. I realize that he's got a tough matchup this week, but, for this week, I mean, moving forward, if it was moving forward strictly, I'm going Breece Hall every week over Nico Collins the rest of the season. But you don't have to make that decision. You get to make it each week.
That's right. Yeah, Breece Hall's got Philadelphia this week, and
Philadelphia. I kept saying Buffalo. Sorry, Philadelphia.
That's all right. Hey, very similar, right? I mean, these are both good defenses up front, and you've got Milano now. It's out for Buffalo, so Philly I would give the advantage as far as overall defense. But Breece Hall with Dalvin Cook has not looked great. Breece Hall's you saw him take off last week. He had a couple big runs in week one this year. I love Breece Hall long term, but that's a great thing about having that option with Breece Hall and Nico Collins. Who has the best matchup on that given week? Right. So unless you're looking to trade one of them, you're in a great spot because you got two good options for your flex position. I'd be curious who your other running backs are if you're putting Breece Hall in the flex.
There you go. Let's move on to we're going to attack these last injuries, and they're not as significant. They are possible not playing this week, and we'll start with Daniel Jones. He suffers a neck injury, which he had last year as well. Lost a few games with that. Did not practice today. Strong chance that he's not playing this week. I mean, that offense is so bad right now. Is there a big drop-off if we're playing Taylor instead of Daniel Jones right now?
I mean, I'd like to say yes, because I believe in the talent of Daniel Jones over Tyrod Taylor because of what he can give you in the run game. Not that Tyrod Taylor doesn't have a little bit of wiggle to him, but Daniel Jones is a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit of a better runner. But from a passing perspective, Tyrod Taylor doesn't have the arm that Daniel Jones has, so you can play a little bit safer in terms of concepts you're going to call with Tyrod Taylor. So I think less ADOT, shorter passing game, get the ball out of his hands. But he's always been an adequate backup. He just was never able to hold on to a starting job, but he's had plenty of career starts, so he's not a bad filler, with Tyrod Taylor. 9 of 12 last week for 86 yards, but you're playing against a pre-bet defense in Miami who was already up big at the time that he came in.
Yeah, it's a tough situation what you're looking at with the New York. It's sad for me because in one of my redraft leagues, I thought I just scored huge. Here's the stack that I have in that league. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, Darren Waller. If you listen to the hype in the offseason, I should be 5-0 right now, but
yeah.
You can probably imagine what I am with that lineup. Let's move on to another injury. We got Tank Dell, concussion, and is expected to miss this week. Did not practice today. Love what we've seen. We've already talked about Achane and how he is, he's diminutive to say the least. He looks like me. Add some muscle. But regardless, here's another little guy that's come out his first year and he's looked very good, but doesn't look like he's going to play this week.
Yeah, look, you're fire up Nico Collins. We've talked about this already. I think Robert Woods is certainly serviceable. And then you got John Mechie. And, Xavier Hutchinson if you get deep, but I think that this is an opportunity for Dalton Schultz to put together back-to-back good games here too. But unfortunate, I love watching Tank Dell play. I like to see what they're doing from a scheme perspective with Nico and Tank and how they're utilizing those guys with Dalton Schultz. So it's unfortunate as a football fan to not be able to watch that offense with Tank Dell as a part of it.
Next one, Zay Jones, knee injury, did not practice today. How do you think that affects the Jacksonville Jaguars if he doesn't play this week?
Well, and he's missed a game already, right? Christian Kirk came out with a slow start. Zay Jones goes down. Christian Kirk all of a sudden has a monster game. I think Christian Kirk has earned his money, especially last year. A lot of people thought he was overpaid. He had a great season last year in Jacksonville. The addition of Calvin Ridley, who's been up and down this season, fast start, went down a little bit, came back again last week. And you've got Jamal Agnew, who's your gadget guy. But I love to see that offense when you have Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram, and you've got Travis Etienne and what he did last week. But they're going to be fine. Christian Kirk can step right up. Calvin Ridley's going to step up. You've got the weapons on offense, and you've got Trevor Lawrence. So I hate if you have Zay Jones, but there's a lot of guys in that offense that can step up in his absence.
I feel like I disrespected the next injury we're talking about, and that's with James Conner. From the day he's come out of Pittsburgh, he suffered cancer early and kind of missed and overcame it, thankfully, as a fellow cancer survivor. I'm so happy that it is not something that he's got to deal with anymore. But I didn't mention him earlier when I talked about the big three with Anthony Richardson, Achane, and Jefferson. But James Conner, knee injury, expected to miss some time. That guy has done nothing but produce since he's been in Arizona. And it's funny when you talk about the landscape of running backs and dynasty, and even more so in dynasty, he's always an afterthought. And he's done nothing but perform since he's been given the opportunity to take over the backfield for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and an old school lunch pail, right? Bring a lunch pail to work, blue collar runner, and what he does in the passing game. Hey, great opportunity for Amari DiMercato out of TCU. 10 carries, 45 yards on a score last week against Cincinnati. Also had a catch for 12 yards. So looking forward to seeing him. He becomes the RB1 if James Conner is out, in my opinion. I think he'll out-touch Keontae Ingram, who in 3 games, total of 12 carries for only 15 yards, only 1 grab for 8. So I think you're going to see Amari DiMercato get an opportunity there.
No concern that in today's when they released the depth chart that Ingram was above the guy from TCU?
No, I think what you do there is you take a guy that's been in your program for a couple years now, and it's in the NFL, especially at the running back position. Zeke Elliott, he did this with Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard. We'll give Zeke Elliott the first series; he'll get the first carry, but Tony Pollard's going to out-touch him over the course of the game. It's Keontae Ingram is the veteran. He's been there. He's I think in his 3rd year now. So he to me, put him in on first down on the first series, let him get the start. Let him have the first series, and then you're going to bring in Amari DiMercato, who can give you something in the passing game too, and see what you have, and you're going to ride the hot hand. But I like DiMercato. We've seen Keontae Ingram now. We kind of know what we got with him. I want to see what we can do with DiMercato, and I say we, like I'm a Cardinal fan, which I'm not. But I want to see how he looks. I want to see how he looks with extended opportunity.
Hey, quickly, you mentioned the fact that he's from TCU. What a backfield they had 2 years ago. You add Zach Evans to that backfield. And ironically, Zach Evans was the most recruited guy out of high school of the 3. And then Kendra Miller last week had a great game. Now, granted, they were up big on New England, so he got opportunities that he probably wouldn't have gotten if the script was different. But needless to say, that was a pretty damn good backfield TCU had.
Yeah.
Last injury we'll get into, and this is kind of a big one. Travis Kelce left the game with the Vikings with an ankle injury. He did return and actually scored a touchdown. So I'm sure there were a lot of Kelce fans that went from, oh my God, I'm dead, to thank God he came back and at least gave me 6 points. And if you're in PPR, 7 points. But with the ankle injury and them having a short week, I would say it's 40-60 for him to play tomorrow night.
Yeah, look, if he can go, he's going to go. And the reality is you're playing the Denver Broncos. We'll get into that more in the Thursday Night Football matchup breakdown. Name a position, they give up the most points to that position in fantasy, basically. So if Kelce can't go, I'm not afraid to fire up Noah Gray, especially if it's tight end premium league and I can play 2 or 3 tight ends in that format. I think everybody's that tight end position is going to eat this week, regardless of who's playing. But I certainly love to watch the Travis Kelce go to work. He puts on an absolute clinic for how to run routes at the tight end position. So hopefully Travis Kelce can go, but if he can't, I'm not afraid to put Noah Gray in some lineups.
Are we going to see Taylor Swift all night tomorrow night? Because, I've got 9
Prime
daughters.
time.
I got 9 daughters. All I've seen the last 20 years or so, it seems like, is Taylor Swift propaganda. Am I going to go through another night of Taylor Swift propaganda?
It's a primetime game.
So that's a yes. All right,
I
Coach,
have no doubt you will see Taylor Swift tomorrow.
Before we move on to our Week 5 recap and some of the games that we want to highlight, Blake Nelson, who you got this week, Coach? Chargers or your Cowboys?
So, Blake, former player of mine at Liberty High School, great
there
kid.
You go. Go Liberty.
Love Blake Nelson, man. Great kid. Selling cars now, by the way. So, I can give him a little plug. If you're looking for a car, call Blake Nelson. That's right. I can't remember what dealership he's at, or I'd plug him
Fair
right
enough.
now. But
okay.
I will take it's I believe this is in LA. I don't have the schedule pulled up in front of me right now, but it's Kellen Moore versus Mike McCarthy. Yeah, revenge game. But revenge game for who? Is it Kellen Moore's the guy that left? So more so for him, but Mike McCarthy's the guy that helped make that call of moving on. I'll take over the play calling. Right now, as a Cowboys fan, I wish we still had Kellen Moore calling plays. So I'm not gonna. I'll put it that way. Cowboys need to bounce back and get a win. I believe they'll do that, but I would not be surprised to see them lose either. But I'll take the Cowboys this week, and he's going to hate me for saying that. But
all right, let's move on. Week 5 recap: Jacksonville upsets Buffalo. Second week in a row they're in London. Obviously, you got to look at the fact that they're not dealing with jet lag. They had a little more comfortable. They were more comfortable being there. They were certainly simulated with the environment, and they eke out a 25-20 win to move 3-2 on the year. Bills are now also 3-2. As much as they struggled early on, and they did struggle, that was a big win for the Jaguars.
It was a massive win, and Trevor Lawrence got off to a slow start. He was 25 of 37. He plays well. I think the big thing was Travis Etienne. I think a lot of people were curious of what that split was going to look like with Tank Bigsby. But Travis Etienne has played very, very well, and Calvin Ridley had 7 for 122. So that offense now is becoming what I was hoping it would be at the beginning of the year. Slow start, but now you're starting to see him put together. And this is against a very good Buffalo defense. I get Matt Milano is out, but he did start that game. But I believe in what Jacksonville does offensively. So it was good to see them get a win against a very good opponent. I like what Doug Peterson's doing there in Jacksonville. And, hey, this could be the beginning of a run for those guys.
It could be. Let me ask you a quick trade question. I'm just going to tell you the trade scenario. You tell me the side that you're going to pick. 1 quarterback, standard scoring league. We've got a second-round pick in 24, second-round pick in 20, third-round pick in 24. Let's start all over. Second round in 20 and 25, third round in 25, and Treylon Burks for Calvin Ridley. Dynasty, which side you taking?
I'm assuming the team that wants to pick up Calvin Ridley is in win now mode, which is why they're looking to trade draft capital. I look at draft picks like a mid to late. So if I'm getting a first, I'm assuming mid to late, especially when it's this early in the year still. I never want to assume it's early, even if I see a rush that looks like shit. We don't know what that team is going to do. If you're in win now mode, I get it. What was it, a 2025 second and a 2026? Did I hear that right?
2025. Second was in 25, third was in 25, and Burks for Calvin Ridley.
God, I'd keep my picks, honestly. The third, it doesn't – mid to late third doesn't move the needle for me at all. That's a crapshoot. You're hoping you hit something there. The second, again, if it's a mid to late second, you can find some value there. So you come down to Treylon Burks and who you think you might hit in the second versus Calvin Ridley. I'm going to backpedal. I'm going to take the Calvin Ridley side. Now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm going to take the Calvin Ridley side there.
All right. That's not what I wanted to hear, but I appreciate the input. Let's move on to our second game of week 5. We got the Eagles beating the Rams. And the biggest reason why I put this game in here is we finally got to see Kupp in the offense and what that would do with Puka Nacua. First and foremost, Philadelphia's damn good, but the Rams played well. I mean, they were in the game. They looked like they were going to compete late, but then Philadelphia kind of took over late. Your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, look, hey, if you're going to beat Philadelphia, if there's a weakness, it's in the pass defense, right? They've given up a lot of yards, but against Matthew Stafford, it was all they kept everything in front. 37 attempts, only threw for 220 yards. Did have a couple touchdowns. We got to see what Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are going to look like. It's what we thought it would be. They're both going to be heavily involved in the passing game. I think that A.J. Brown has emerged as the wide receiver one. He got off to a slow start. You saw what he did on the sideline. I think it was in week 2 when he got really pissed off. He wasn't getting more involved. Jalen Hurts is now 300 yards passing, 72 yards rushing, scores 1 through the air, scores 1 on the ground, and A.J. Brown becomes that dominant alpha wide receiver that we know he can be. And Dallas Goedert had a massive game. It was good to see him come out and put together a really good game. That Eagles 49ers in the NFC, that to me is the NFC. I hope that ends up being the NFC championship game. Somehow one of them doesn't fall in seeding, that it becomes a divisional game. But I really hope that is the NFC championship game. As a Cowboys fan, obviously I want the Cowboys to be in there, but being a smart analyst, I would tell you that it should be Philadelphia and San Francisco. That's going to be a hell of an NFC championship game. But I'm also very impressed the job Sean McVay has done with this team. I think a lot of people thought they were going to be rebuild mode, and Matthew Stafford seems to be the guy that he was, in their Super Bowl run. What they've got in the receiving game, then you add Tyler Higbee and Tutu Atwell to what they've already got, and you've got Kyron Williams, who I think is stepping up and seeing some volume. But they're going to continue to put together a roster over the next year or two, and I think you're going to see Sean McVay is going to have this LA Rams team. They're going to compete. And I get you're losing Aaron Donald, you're going to lose Matthew Stafford eventually, but I think that this guy knows how to build a roster, and I think he stayed because he wanted to see this through.
It'll be fun to watch over the next few years. As a guy that has nothing but Rams coverage all over his TV, living in LA. Certainly not talking much about the Dodgers because your Diamondbacks are.
Let's go.
No, shut the hell up with that. All right, moving on. 49ers, my favorite part of the show. Let's talk more 49ers Cowboys.
Let's do it.
Fudge. I love Brock Purdy. I could watch that guy play football all day long. But regardless, aside from that, that was humiliating if I'm a Cowboys fan. And it was so impressive what we saw out of that defense and out of that offense of San Francisco, seeing Kittle involved, seeing them just kind of do what they want, so to speak. And we've talked about this forever. And there's a lot of talk about Brock Purdy and his contract, but that contract is the reason why they have a roster they have. He's currently making less than $900,000 a year. My coworkers and I were talking about that today and kind of laughing. You think that's a lot of money, but he's got to live in San Francisco with that money, one of the most expensive places in the world to live. And I mean, he's got a roommate. He's still driving his high school car.
Yep.
But regardless, that's a pretty impressive. You just said it. That's a pretty impressive San Francisco team.
Yeah, it to me right now, if I've got to put it, there's no weakness in this offense or this defense. The coaching staff has got these guys all bought in, and that's why I give them the edge over Philadelphia until Philadelphia can figure out how to stop other opponent teams from throwing the ball over the field. But this is it's the big stage, it's the big moment, it's the team that's knocked out of the playoffs for 2 years in a row. You had the reporter after the last week's game when Dallas won big against New England, celebrating a 38-3 win, and Dak's in the post-game presser, and the guy asked him, how do you feel about facing San Francisco? You're so pissed off basically about what happened last year, having them end your season 2 years in a row. And he's kind of like, you're going to ask me this after a 38-3 win about who we're playing next week? Like, thanks for pissing me off. I appreciate that. Like, he was going to use that for motivation. That motivation didn't last very long, right?
No.
Motivation is like taking a shower. It doesn't last very long, but it's a good idea to take one. And I think that was Dallas it's again, until they win big games and big moments, it's going to be the same narrative against the Dallas Cowboys. And it is what it is. And as a Cowboys fan, you got to take it. This is a team that we do not match up well. And I don't care if it's, you want to talk about coaching, you want to talk about offensive line, you want to talk about D-line, you want to talk about linebackers, you want to talk about second. I don't care what position group you talk about. I don't care if you want to talk scheme, you want to talk whatever. San Francisco is far ahead of where the Dallas Cowboys are right now. And that's just the reality of it.
They're crazy good. They are so fun to
They're
watch.
fun to watch. And Brock Purdy, and
We're
look,
gonna get into them. We're gonna get
that's
into them.
right.
But
I'll wait.
yes,
We'll get into it.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah. We're in fact, let's get right into it because we're getting from here to our right. Excuse me, no, we're not. We're getting into our Thursday night preview. I apologize for that. I wanted to talk about Brock so
We'll
bad.
get through it. We'll get through it.
Yeah,
Yep.
there we go. We got Denver 1-4 at Kansas City 4-1. Who wins for this week? I got the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs win 41, Broncos 20. Line is Chiefs minus 10.5, and over and under is 51. Coach, who do you like winning this game?
So we're close. I've got Chiefs 37, Broncos 17. So Chiefs obviously cover at minus 10.5. And then the over, what's interesting is if you look on FanDuel, it's 51, but it's down to 47.5. And I think that's ironic but you see this a lot
Is
with
that
teams.
Kelsey? It has anything to do with Kelsey, maybe?
I think it's Kelsey, and I think it's when you look at game script too, right? I think you're looking at people not fully believing in what's going on in Denver, even though Russell Wilson's QB8 right now on the season is playing better than he did last year. But you've got Javonte Williams coming back off the injury, and you've got there's some question marks, right? But Kansas City is not putting up the 40 points a game they did a year ago. They're a little bit more methodical this year. They're rushing the ball a little bit more this year with Pacheco and get in the receiver position. We could go on about that. I know you saw my post earlier today. I just think we don't see Kansas City as this. So I think that's all those factors have I think driven that over under down to 47.5. We both have them on the over. So we still see it as a game they're going to score more than even 51. I've got them at 54 total points. So I still think it's the over.
Bet the over, especially if it's 47.
Yep.
Let's get into start and sit, Coach. Who do you like to start for Denver?
So for Denver, the only guy that I'm confident starting, Casey's given up just 98 yards rushing, 191 through the air over the last 3 games and 16 points per game. Now, granted, they paid the Bears, the Jets, and the Vikings, right? So Vikings can put some points up. The Jets and Bears have struggled to do that. But Russell Wilson, I'm starting 19.7 fantasy points per game. He's not scored less than 15.2 in any game this season. I think his QB2, high-end QB2 with QB1 upside this week. I expect a negative game script. I think they're going to be playing from behind, which means more passing volume. So I like Russell Wilson. Outside of that, there's not anybody on Denver that I'm 100% confident. I think some people would be surprised to hear, well, if you think it's a negative game script, they're going to throw the ball. But you've got Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims. You go on down the line, and Adam Trout. I just don't. They're not having those pop games. Judy's wide receiver 33, Cortland Sutton wide receiver 35. I think there's better options that you can get at the wide receiver position. So I don't have any of those guys as must starts. He could spread the ball around. So I like Russell Wilson to start for Denver. For Kansas City, again, I said it earlier. Denver's given up 252 rushing yards over the last 3 games on a per game basis, which is last in the NFL. They gave up 350 to Miami, 171 to the Bears, 234 to the Jets, and they've given up 283 yards passing per game, which is also 30th. So you're starting Patrick Mahomes, you're starting Isaiah Pacheco, you're starting Travis Kelce if he plays. The only thing I'm not doing, if you want to get into sits, is I'm not playing the running back room in Denver because I don't know what that split's going to look like.
Right? Yeah. No.
So I don't trust any of them. We don't know what that's if it's a negative game
script. You already have a negative play script. Yep.
Yeah. Why play Javonte Williams? A lot of volume. If he's coming off the injury and he's not, the game's getting out of hand. I'm going to rest him. So now it comes down to Samaj P. Ryan and Jaleel McLaughlin. Again, don't feel comfortable with any of those 3 guys. Marvin Mims, second-round pick out of Oklahoma, has not panned out. His wide receiver only 63 or 62 this week. He's only got 3 targets over the last 2 games. Brandon Johnson, wide receiver 90, 2 targets over the last 2 games. There really is no wide receiver 3 in that offense yet. Adam Troutman's only 4.2 fantasy points per game. So not starting any of those guys. And for Kansas City, I'm not starting any of the wide receivers because, again, I don't know. If you look at their target leaders, there's 7 different wide receivers that have had 3 or more targets this year. They only have a 60% catch rate as a position group. And your target leaders are Rashee Rice at 4.8 per game, Kadarius Toney 3.8, Sky Moore 3.4, Watson 3.2, MVS. You add all those together, great. That's an alpha wide receiver. You start splitting those up between multiple guys, good luck trying to figure out who's going to pop this week. I'm not starting any of those guys.
Yeah.
You've got to have better options than any of those guys. If I had to start one in a deep league, you and I are on the same page here. It's Rashee Rice.
It's crazy because they're still the same. They certainly look like they're the same Kansas City offense. And yet you mentioned a great point today with their receiver room and all this. And we'll get into the reasons for that here in a few minutes. But yeah, there isn't one you can trust unless his name is Travis Kelce, and he's not even a receiver. Let's get to a question here. We got Tyler. He wants to know, should we start Ingram or Logan Thomas and also pick up Gabe Davis or Osborne? Obviously, this is redraft. I'm starting Ingram this week. I loved what I saw to Logan last week, but I'm still starting Ingram. And if I had to pick up Davis or Osborne, I'm picking up Gabe Davis. I'll take the number 2 receiver for Buffalo over Osborne because when Jefferson does come back, there's not going to be much meat left on the bone.
Yeah, I think the tough one there is Evan Ingram versus Logan Thomas. I'm a Logan Thomas guy. We called it last week, but I think Ingram has done it. First of all, Ingram's played in every game this year, and he's been consistent. Logan Thomas has missed a couple games. He came off the injury, had a great game last week, but is that sustainable with a quarterback that one week throws 4 interceptions, the next week throws for 300 yards? So yes, do I think? But you've got Curtis Samuel, you've got Antonio Gibson, you've got Terry McLaurin, you got Jahan Dotson. I would still lean Ingram based on what we've seen so far this year, but that's a tough decision, and I definitely go Gabe Davis over Osborne.
You ready for risers and fallers, Coach? This is tough. Have to do this every week, isn't it?
It is, because you got to try to go back and remember who you talked about already.
But I do think it fluctuates though. And even if you had a guy, I think you had Khalil Herbert as a faller one week, the very next week he was a riser. Yeah. And now this week he could be a faller because there's a lot of people who seem to think this is all Rashawn Johnson needs is the clear path. And unfortunately, he's got an issue with a concussion, but he's got a clear path to take over that backfield with Herbert out for a while. But anyways, let's get into risers and fallers. And for me, this is always related to dynasty and not redraft. So take that for a grain of salt. But my first guy is Rashee Rice. And I bring it up because they don't have a number 1 receiver. They have a number 1 target guy in Kelce. But as far as a number 1 receiver, they don't have it. And you talked earlier that he's averaging more targets a game than any other receiver on his team. He was the 2nd round draft choice out of I believe Rice. No, where TCU? No, SMU. Sorry about that. Rice may be confused. 2 Texas schools, but it was SMU. On the season, he's only has 17 receptions, but he's turned them into 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. I truly believe he's the guy you want in Dynasty, and his role is only going to grow as we move on.
I think it's a great call. When I saw your list, I was like, I like it because we just broke down the Kansas City receiver group, and I broke them down earlier today on Twitter. But again, if there's one guy in that offense, especially in Dynasty, which is what we're talking about, that's the guy I want, right?
He's the only guy I want. I don't trust Tony and his injury history.
Yeah, not at all.
I want Rice. I want the receiver. I don't want the gadget player.
Yep, I agree with you. Are you going your 3 guys, or are we going 1 for 1?
Let's get your first one, Coach.
All right, so I've got DJ Moore. And I know that seems like an obvious choice, but guy got off to a slow start. A lot of guys didn't want. A lot of Bears fans were like, hey, tank for Caleb. This Justin Fields guy ain't it. Like, did you forget everything he did in the second half of last year? Like, we're seeing it. The guy can play football, right? So DJ Moore, 27.1 and 49 PPR fantasy points over the last 2 weeks. In those 2 games, 19 targets, 16 grabs for 361 yards and 4 touchdowns. DJ Moore's back on the map, and now they're understanding, hopefully Matt Eberflus, again, we talked about this with CeeDee Lamb and the Cowboys earlier, you have playmakers. Your job as an offensive coordinator is to scheme easy catches for him, get him in space, and let him do his thing, and you have to target him on a consistent basis week in and week out. I don't care who's the cover guy. I don't care what's you've got to find ways to get those guys touches, and Chicago's finally figuring that out.
It's fun to watch. It's what we all hope for, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
And it's funny because you kind of had to put a qualifier when you picked DJ Moore as a riser, but we're literally talking about guys who you could trade more for or get more for now than you could last week. And DJ Moore is certainly that. And my next guy is Jordan Addison. Unfortunately, we lose the prince of all receivers in Jefferson, but I think this is actually what Jordan Addison kind of needs. We get to find and see his talent. They've kind of brought him in slow. He's got 19 receptions for 249 yards, but he's gotten in the end zone 3 times. The guy's a playmaker, and I'm looking forward to see what he's going to do, having the opportunity to take over the number 1 wide receiver spot for the next few weeks.
Yeah, I was higher on Jordan Addison than I was on JSN. And again, it goes to me being a huge believer in Kevin O'Connell and what they can do offensively. So I'm excited to see it. I'm excited for what Kevin O'Connell without, because now you're going to see. Now you go, okay, now you don't have Justin Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell as the offensive coordinator. You're going to get T.J. Hawkinson involved heavily, and now you get Jordan Addison, who I think is the second best option in that offense. I love it. I love that pick. It's a good call.
All right, who's your second riser, Coach?
So I went Travis Etienne, and I did it again because people were low on a little bit lower on him because of the Tank Bigsby signing. People thought Bigsby played a bit more of a role in the passing game and short yardage situation, goal line work. Etienne absolutely ran wild last week against a very good Buffalo defense. 26 carries, 136 yards, found the end zone twice. Also had 4 grabs, but he's posted it. A 94% snap share, 24.3% target share. Wild Tanks Bigsby is only getting 11.9% of the snaps and just 2 targets. This is Etienne's backfield. We now know it. We've seen enough games now to understand it. If he continues to play at the level he is, he's not giving up anything unless it's late in the game. They're up 30 or down 30. This is Travis Etienne's backfield. So I love what they're doing. Again, I'm a big Jacksonville guy right now. I love what Doug Peterson can do with that offense. And Travis
He
Etienne
certainly made a lot of people. He certainly made a lot of people think that Tank Bigsby take early in the year that he was going to take over the offense, reconsider their thoughts. But yeah, I like it. I like what I've seen. That run that he had last week where he popped for a long score, he got low and he was in a huge crowd, and then he just popped out, and that was the end of it. So it's great to see that he's overcome the injury, and it's also great to see that he's overcome a young running back being drafted in the same program, and yet he hasn't let it deter him what he's done on the field so far. Let's get to my last riser, and we've talked about him a lot, and that's Brock Purdy. Again, the value that he has after what we just saw against what a lot of people considered the number 1 defense in the NFL. He went out there and he just runs the offense. He does it within the system, yet at the same time, that touchdown pass right off the bat with Kittle, it was not a design rollout. He kind of got pushed. He moved to his right and just put a beautiful pass out to Kittle. I love the kid. He's got 98 completions for 136 attempts, 72% percentage. I remember as a high school coach, I remember growing up in high school football, we were happy if we can get 50%. At the NFL level, they were happy if you can get 63%. And now we got a second-year player who was Mr. Irrelevant, completing 72% of his passes with 9 touchdowns. You're not going to get the rushing upside. He's only rushed for 24 yards.
Interceptions.
He's 0 interceptions. He's gotten you a touchdown. Man, talk about a guy who's got an incredible floor. Give me Brock Purdy in my offense. Give me Brock Purdy on my SF teams. I'm happy to have him. The guy's a stud.
Yeah, and we have to stop saying we've seen enough of him now at the NFL level. 9 starts or 10 starts, 10-0. I don't even know what the touchdowns are now. I think it's 22 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. He's never lost a regular season game. The only game he's lost in his NFL career is a game he got knocked out in the first quarter due to an injury, but you take the loss because you started and played the first snap. He's never lost a game he has started and finished at the NFL level, right? I don't care what you say about roster, scheme. You don't average 250 yards passing, over 2 touchdowns per game and not turn the ball over. You don't call that guy a game manager. Trent Dilfer was a game manager, right? Brock Purdy is not. Kyle Shanahan has said it. That playbook is 100% wide open. Now, if they weren't blowing people out, Brock Purdy's putting up even bigger numbers. They don't have to throw the ball 40 times a game, so he doesn't have to do it. Now, if you look at the timing of his throws, the footwork, how he goes through his progressions, How he puts receivers and throws a catchable ball and puts them in space and hits them in stride to get yards after the catch, he does an outstanding job. You can't just plug somebody into a great offense and expect them to do really well, or the Dallas Cowboys would have a Super Bowl win by now.
There
The
you
Chargers
go.
would have a Super Bowl win by now. I mean, you can go down the line of teams that should have Super Bowls if it was that easy based on just roster. He's getting it done.
He's getting it done for sure. I love the kid. Can't wait to see him as his career continues. Who's your last riser, Coach?
So I've got Logan Thomas. We just talked about him a little bit. Finished with 9 grabs on 11 targets for 77 yards and a score against Chicago last week. And the reason why I put him as a riser is because we already knew he was a decent tight end. The tight end landscape this year is so awful, right? But his next 3 opponents are Falcons, Giants, and Eagles, who rank 31st, 14th, and 22nd in fantasy points allowed at the tight end position. So he's a guy I like over the next 3 weeks. And so when you're talking about risers, you're talking about give me a guy that consistently give me some touches, potentially find the end zone in an offense that I think is going to have the passing volume to support it. And that is Washington, who is not playing well, and they're playing from behind. They're playing in negative game scripts. I like Logan Thomas, especially over the next 3 weeks. He's tied in 11 on the season.
Like it, like the call. Let's get to guys that kind of have fallen as far as value goes in Dynasty and maybe even redraft. And for me, the first one's kind of a surprise because I thought that he was going to be, we talk about, I thought he had a very good floor. But last week, that's James Cook. James Cook had 5 carries for -4 yards on the season. He's rushed 61 times for 292 yards, only 1 touchdown. And he's only had 14 receptions on the year. I kind of expected more out of that. They talked about him being, he came into the league and everyone thought he was going to be nothing but a third down back. If you're a third down back, you got to contribute in the passing game as far as I'm concerned. So he's a faller for me.
Yeah, a little frustrating. I also thought that, and look, the volume has been there, especially early in the season. He was getting the running down.
It has decreased the last few weeks, though.
Yeah, so there are some concerns there, but I still believe in the talent. I still think James Cook can be the guy. I think hopefully he can get right, especially in an offense like that. But yeah, I see why you put him there. I really do. So, all right,
let's get to your first follower, and then we'll get to Hunter's question.
Yeah, so I went to which is a great question. So excited to get to that. So I went Mac Jones. Over the last 2 weeks, the Patriots have been outscored 72-3. In those games, Mac Jones has only completed 24 of 44 passes for 260 yards, no touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Pulled in both games late for Bailey Zappi in the second half. This is when, especially in fantasy, forget real football right now. And I'm more of a real football guy than a fantasy guy. But in fantasy, when you're getting blown out and teams are giving you underneath stuff and giving you receptions and just trying to limit, right? You should be putting numbers up in those situations, negative game scripts. He's not doing it. He's averaging 201.6 yards passing per game, and the Patriots are 32nd in scoring with just 11 points a game. Everything about Mac Jones right now is not good. It's not. It is just, I don't know how you can try to talk up Mac Jones in any way, shape, or form right now with the way that offense is playing, the way he's performing right now.
I wouldn't even want him in SF right now.
100%.
It's and I wouldn't want anybody on that offense. And we're going to get into.
I don't have Mac Jones on any of my 22 rosters.
It's rough, and 6 Super Bowls means a hell of a lot. That's freaking incredible. Great job, but at the same time, I think that ship is getting pretty close to have been sailed. So, New England's offense is pitiful, and that it's ironic because now we're going to get right into my second faller, and that's Ramondre Stevenson. He had a hell of a year last year. He was the guy that talk about a true 3-down back. He was able to help you out immensely with the passing game, which is so big in PPR when you're having to start a running back. But this year he's only has 68 carries for 180 yards, a touchdown, only 12 receptions for 87 yards. Whether or not it's related to Mac Jones struggling and the offense struggling, it doesn't matter. He's almost unplayable. So many times people on Twitter talk about how Kyle Pitts, Drake London, even Bijan Robinson struggle because of Arthur Smith, struggle because of Desmond Ridder. The reality is that doesn't change the fact that These guys cannot be played if their situation continues. So Ramondre Stevenson's a follow for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. The combination of, negative game scripts and teams are going to load the box to stop the run against New England and force Mac Jones to
He's
beat you
their
in the
only
passing game.
offensive guy.
He is. He is and I'm high on Ramondre Stevenson. I like the talent. So I hopefully hopefully they figure it out. But my next faller, I've got Hayden Hurst. I think there's a lot of people with what he did in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow when he came over to Carolina, thought, hey, this is a guy that could help out a young quarterback, be a safety, security blanket for him, and move the chains. But in week 1, he scored 15.1 fantasy points, finished as the tight end 2. So you're like, okay, here we go. This is what we were hoping for, and then some. But in the last 4 games, he's only at 3.5 PPR points per game. He's had exactly 3 targets in each of the last 4 games with just 8 grabs for 59 yards and has not found paint. His per game averages over that span are only 3 targets, 2 grabs, and 14.75 yards per game. You can't play him. And if you're in a tight end premium league and you thought, hey, if I don't get one of those top 3 or 4 guys, I'm going to wait late on tight ends and build other positions. So you took a shot on Hayden Hurst late. You're paying for it right now.
Yeah. That whole offense, I expected a lot more out of Bryce Young. I don't know what, and they gave up a lot, man. They gave up a lot to get him. They don't have a first rounder next year. They don't have DJ Moore. They don't have anyone for him to throw to. I don't know how they fix it. And it's sad because so many times situations dictate a player's ability to be able to develop, and they haven't put him in a very good spot. Before we get on to my last faller, let's look at Hunter's question. And you and I have kind of difference of opinion. What do I do with James Conner in Dynasty? If I can get a second round for him, I'm trading him right away. If I can't get a second round for him, I think he's a hold. I think he's a guy that you got to – there are times where a player is on your team where you just go, hey, look, I'm going to ride and die with him until the day is done, because you're not going to get the value for him that he could produce late in the season. When he comes back, the guy's been nothing productive. So I'm not just going to give him away. I'd rather have him as someone that I can know if I have to play him and he's healthy, I'm going to get some production out of him. So that's where I lean with him.
Yeah, I think the hard part, right, and I agree with you. If I can get a second right now while he's not able to play, sure. I think as you get later in the season, if your playoffs start in week 14, 15, and a team, I've said this a million times, it is the most often injured position in football, and especially when it comes to fantasy. So there's always, you've got to have a lot of running. You've got to have enough running backs on your roster to offset that, but you can always catch a team in week 10, 11, 12 that's really trying to make the playoffs and that no man's land of, well, I can't really rebuild because I've got too many wins to do that. So now I got to try to make a playoff run. I got to try to win the whole thing. I'm going to overpay for someone like a James Conner later on in the season. You might be able to get a late first, early second. Now, again, we don't know what that spot's going to be, but
sure,
it's harder for me to trade him when he's hurt versus waiting until week 10, 11, 12, and he's popping a couple games back to back, and I'm out of it. That trade value goes up because now that guy's trying to win a championship.
Right. That does change everything. So I take it back. We don't completely disagree, but I'm holding if I can't get what I think is value enough.
Yep.
Let's move on. Who is your next faller, Coach?
So I've got Sky Moore. I'm going to continue to go down this path of Kansas City wide receivers. Over the last 2 games, Sky Moore is averaging just 2.5 PPR points per game. He's only seen 4 targets, 2 grabs, and 11 yards. He's only earning a 9-point targets are earned. We talk about this all the time. If your quarterback and your offensive coordinator do not trust you, they do not scheme for you, they do not look for you in tough situations and when they need a first down. 9.4% target share, only 62.9% snap share. He's 4th on the team in targets behind Kelsey, Rashee Rice, Kadarius Toney, who doesn't even play a lot of snaps, but he's got more targets with those snaps. He's 5th in receiving yards behind Kelsey, Justin Watson, Rashee Rice, and Noah frickin' Gray.
Yeah, he was, in my one quarterback home league, he was a first-round choice in the rookie draft last year. Everyone, you want a piece of that Kansas City office.
I wanted Sky Moore to be a thing. I did.
No,
I wanted Sky Moore to be a thing.
Everyone did.
Yeah.
It's not fun, but that's a great call. All right, my last faller is Miles Sanders. Again, part of it may be due to the offense struggling, but he's only had 61 carries for 190 yards, a touchdown, very limited. And it was funny. They showed some clip in the preseason where Miles Sanders was in the office talking to the coach, and he was told, hey, you want to get back to where you had a crap load of catches in the offense? Okay, well, that's going to happen. Well, it hasn't happened. He only has 15 receptions, 81 yards. But what's more concerning is that Chuba Hubbard looks like he's almost taking over, or at least taking a bigger chunk than we thought. Chuba, who is much cheaper, has 35 carries, 154 yards, and has 12 receptions and 57 yards in receiving. So they're pretty much the same back. And with that, give me the younger guy. Miles Sanders' value has definitely gone down.
Yeah, it's a typical, right? He Philadelphia last year, he finally gets some touches, gets some volume, and has a great year behind a very, very good offensive line, a good offensive coordinator, and you got a good quarterback back there. And you're like, okay, if he goes over to Carolina, there's a chance again to be the guy. I follow the money. I'm going to get myself in a good situation, and it just, unfortunately, it hasn't panned out. Sometimes you're better off trying to figure out how to stay where you're at, right? But unfortunately, you're going to follow the money, and you're going to go into a situation you feel like puts you in the best situation long term for you and your family. And he felt like that was moving on and going to Carolina.
Right. And he made the move he had to make, because I don't think that money would have been there.
He did have to make it.
And the biggest thing, look, situation doesn't matter. We all are looking for the same thing, and that is production in fantasy football. So whatever his situation doesn't change the fact that he's not doing what we thought he would do. But it doesn't help that he's in that offense. Who's your last faller, Coach?
I went through all three of mine, I think, didn't I? Yeah, Mac Jones, Hayden Hurst, and Sky Moore. I hit them all.
There we go. So you were one up on me. Hey, last question we're going to hit. Hunter's the one who asked about what do I do with Connor, and then he's asking what affordable running back should I be targeting. That's, again, we kind of would suggest waiting a bit, so that could change. But if you can get a guy, I was really excited what I saw out of Kendra Miller last week. If you can get a guy like Kendra Miller, maybe throw in a late pick, he's a guy that I would be targeting for a Connor.
Yeah, Kendra Miller's a very good one. I still think Rashawn Johnson, as much as people want it, he's now getting that opportunity. If you can try to get him before this next game, because if he pops, his price goes up. So this is your last chance to buy low on Rashawn Johnson. So those are the two guys that I would key in. I still think that there's an opportunity as the season goes on for a guy like Antonio Gibson. You can get him super cheap, almost as a throw-in in trades. If anything happens to Brian Robinson, there's an opportunity there. If they continue to put themselves in negative game scripts, I think Antonio Gibson's a guy. He had a great rail route. Some people call it wheel route last week on or last week's game, and made a very, very good grab. And if you know him, he's got a history. He was a wide receiver and originally in Memphis. So 10.4 fantasy points last week. So I like Antonio Gibson. Super, super cheap buy right now.
Love it. Love that call. Love you guys for all the questions. Thank you so much. Sorry we won't be available this weekend. If you do have any start and sit questions, send them to Coach Bruce at Coach Bruce 122. I will be unavailable, but Coach will be happy to help you with any of your questions. And with that, Coach, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the wedding, and always enjoy my time with you.
All right, man. You too. Have a great one, man.
Peace out, everybody.